Hey, Coach, thanks for checking out today's video on the 4-3 defense. We're going to look at the foundations of the 4-3 defense. I want to let you know that this is on YouTube, but also this is Season 6, Episode 1 of the Football Coaching Podcast. So if you enjoy these and you want to take them on the go with you, listen to in your earbuds, you can do that. Just look for the Football Coaching Podcast at your podcatcher of choice, your podcast app on your iPhone, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, you're going to be able to find the Football Coaching Podcast. If you don't find it where you look, let me know so I can get it there. And just another way for you to get these episodes, but we'll have the video here. We'll be drawing it up, so a great way to learn the 4-3 defense and the foundations of the Miami 4-3 defense. If you enjoy it, if you don't want to miss any of those, make sure that you click the like button, subscribe, and click that little notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from Joe Daniel Football. So let's get started looking at the 4-3 defense. All right, we're looking at the Miami 4-3 defense. So it is different than maybe your college or your pro 4-3. This is the defense that I teach in the 4-3 defense system at Joe Daniel Football, JDFB Insiders. And you can check that out at joedanielfootball.com. But when we get into this today, you know, there are things that have evolved from installing football's 4-3 over defensive front that came out in 2009, I believe. So there are things from 10 years ago that have evolved. I can't say that I don't contradict myself when you look at something from 10 years ago and you listen to me talking today, 10 years later. I've learned a lot since then. I wasn't, a genius then, and I'm not a genius now, but I'm a heck of a lot closer. Technically, beside the point. So, the Miami 4-3 defense, just as a quick background, and I've talked more about the background, and if you go back into the Football Coaching Podcast archives, I'll link in the show notes at joedanielfootball.com/2019 Miami 4-3, so it'll be 2019 MIAMI 4-3. I'll link to some of the older podcasts where I broke down, for example, we broke down the Miami 4-3 defense playbook from, I think, 1991 or somewhere around there. I've done that on the podcast before. Good one to listen to and check out that playbook and follow along with it. This was a defense that was developed by Jimmy Johnson. It kind of evolved from a 4-3 flex, but developed by Jimmy Johnson to try to stop the wishbone option that Barry Switzer was running at Oklahoma. And had a lot of success with it. Obviously won a lot of championships. I learned and went on and ran it in Dallas as well. I learned this defense from three places. I would give full credit to 3 places that I learned this. Number one, there were 2 videos that came out in the early 90s that were by Tommy Tuberville. And I was just looking to see if they happen to be here. They do. I have them on VHS, so if you're watching the YouTube, then I'm holding them up if you're not. And the one that really, there's one that's on 2 deep coverage on cover 2. I don't run that cover 2, but there's some nuggets in there that you can take about how the run fits together. But the one that is called Miami Hurricanes 4-3 front 7, it is, I'd say in my coaching career, this has been the single most valuable video. No, I'm not going to send it to you. No, I'm not going to pirate it for you. No, I'm not going to do any of that for you. I've seen it available in places, but I don't remember where. I don't have it. I may have transferred it to a DVD at some point as a backup. I haven't watched it in a while. It's a shame that it's not available. But, there's a lot of good stuff available now. This is where I learned it in 2007. And at that time, that video was not even really easily attainable. I think I got it from Cisco's in like 2007. Those were the companies that was back when they used to send out the mailers. I don't know who else does it now, but how they do it now. But they sent out the mailers and you got it. Second place that I learned it was going to Glazier Clinics. Now, that is absolutely available to you. I will be speaking this year at the Baltimore Glazier Clinic, so if you want to check that out, I'll be talking 4-2-5 defense at the Baltimore Glazier Clinic on Friday night, I think, is the schedule right now. That's where I got put in, Friday night. I'll be talking 4-2-5 in those, like, it's like 5 25-minute sessions. I think it's 4 in a Q&A. But that's the Baltimore Glacier Clinic, February 2nd, 3rd, something like that. I haven't looked at the exact dates on it. It's going to be February 7th is when it is. I think that's right. It may be the week after. Baltimore Glacier. Whenever Glacier's in Baltimore, though. I should probably know the date. I think it's the 7th through the 9th. And I'm on the 7th. But I learned a ton just going and listening to every 4-3 coach that I could find and learning as much as I could. Now, I learned way too much. I learned like all sorts of zone blitz stuff that I didn't need yet. Luckily, that Tuberville video really gave me a foundation for the defense. They didn't get into blitzes and stuff. It was a great video because it gave the foundation. And Tommy Tuberville has a legendary tracksuit on from the early, those early 90s tracksuits. They've really got to get all of those. Those were the best. Coach's Choice had these phenomenal videos in the early 90s of these coaches who became legends. And they would just be at a coaching clinic. Coaching clinics look different then. Like, everybody had a glass of bourbon out. Even then. And there was Saban, and I remember just so many legendary coaches did these things. I think Dungy had one, and they were published they were on Glacier for a time back around 2009. So I got to see a lot of them, but I don't have them now. The third place was Coach Huey. I don't spend any time on Coach Huey anymore. Every once in a while, I go do a vanity search for my name, just to make sure I'm not getting trashed on there. Sometimes I am. Most of the time, it's very good, or very good or nothing. But I don't know if I've been trashed on there in the last 6 months. I don't know about it. Usually somebody lets me know. It doesn't happen much, but I don't go on there much. But I learned from, at the time, it was OJW, Al Jesu. I remember the screen names. I wasn't like heavily involved in it. I just read. I think that screen name Deuce was like trying to learn it and learning everything from OJW, and I followed all of that, printed them off, and studied them. And for the most part, as far as I know, Coach Huey is still well archived. So when you go on there and you are looking at what the latest and greatest is, in the last times that I looked, there wasn't a lot of 4-3 anymore, but you go back in the archives to 2007, and there is. And if it's still there, you can learn a ton from that stuff. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm just telling you some resources. Now, obviously, I think we've got really good resources today. Coverage-wise, I think that there was the Match Quarters blog that I really liked. I think that I've got a bunch of good stuff. I'm not going to lie. I think I did a pretty good job, and I want to update it for 2020. But that's a big undertaking because I think that and 425 need to be updated. So we'll get on and get it going. But that's going to be a big-time goal, is to get everything updated for 2020. But that's where the Miami 4-3 came from. That's kind of the background on it, my background on it. And so let's get into I want to teach you the base front, okay, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Miami 4-3. I'll also talk some about what's changed as far as how I want to handle the Miami 4-3 with some of what I've learned over the recent years. So if you're in the 4-3 defense system now, or if you have my 4-3 defense ebook, Installing Football's 4-3 over defensive front, and I am an over front guy, but I do love the under front. I'll give you another great resource if you want to run the under front. Jerry Gordon's book, fantastic. Cannot recommend it enough. Very simple, very simple. Coach Gordon has a very simple approach in that book that I love, especially the coverage aspect that you can check out. So all different places for you to take a look at and learn more about the 4-3 defense. But this podcast is going to be a good start or a good refresher or whatever that may be. So the 4-3 defense, the Miami 4-3 defense, starts out with the basic alignment of, on the defensive line, everybody plays from an outside shade. Okay, everybody plays from a 9, a 3, a 1, and a 5. And this is by design for a number of reasons. So your strong end is going to be in a 9 technique, outside shade of the tight end, And with the 4-3, the teaching starts from a 21 personnel pro I. And some guys will tell you that's, that offense is dead. It's not. I can promise you. I've been looking at teams running it all over the country. So maybe it's dead in your area, but I can promise you also that football is cyclical. So don't be surprised if it comes back. But I've seen people walk out of clinics because somebody was talking about, an I formation. And it's like, well, somebody's going to line up in it. This is just where we start teaching the foundation of the principles. It's easier to understand the defense against a pro I. So we start out with a pro I with a 9 technique defensive end, outside shade of the tight end. If the tight end's not there, he plays in an outside shade 5 tech. Okay, but we start out with the 9. The 3 tech, the cornerstone of the defensive line, the 3 tech is the outside shade of the strong side guard. Strength is going to be called to the tight end for our purposes right now. Strength is called to tight end, then multiple receivers, meaning if there's no tight end, if we got a 20 personnel, there's 2 receivers, a twin side, and then a single receiver side, it's to the twin side. Tight end, multiple receivers. If the formation is balanced, we call strength to the wide side of the field. And if the ball is in the middle of the field with a balanced formation, we make the strength call to the left because most offensive coordinators are right-handed. You can go further than that. You can do more than that. We do a lot in the 4-3 system with playing with strength that you can either do or not do. But the key here, everybody's playing in an outside shade, and it has several advantages. Number one, everybody is not only outside shaded, but everybody is tilted. Your defensive ends are going to be really tilted, okay? Almost 45 degrees in some cases. So they're like tilted, pointing at the hip of the tackle or the hip of the tight end because they are spill players. There used to be a defense that was talked about on Coach Huey. I used to see all this stuff about it. And it's supposed to be something special, and it's just a name, but it was the like scream and splatter and all this stuff. It's just spilling. But the idea that these guys are coming hard, and if they get a down block, the key rule in the 4-3 is block down, step down. If that guy doesn't block you, Tommy Tuberville talks about it in that video that I talked about earlier. Tommy Tuberville talks about if he goes away, you treat it as run away. So in other words, if I have a 9-tech defensive end and the tight end steps down inside, I don't care if it's a down block, a reach block, all of that is irrelevant to me. I treat that as run away, and I just sprint straight down the heels of the offensive line, and the desired result will either be I run the play down, because we'll talk about personnel. These guys might actually be able to do it. I'll either run the play down, or it's actually, a kick out block coming, a power type of play, and he is going to kick me. I'm going to blow up, wrong arm, train wreck, whatever words you want to use. I'm going to blow up that kick out block, get underneath it, spill the ball, or I am going to be in a gap exchange where I now become the dive player. Okay, the normal option rules, the base option rule is A gap, B gap players. This is every defense. A gap, B gap players handle the dive in your normal triple option. C gap defender has the quarterback, and your force player has the pitch, and alley defender is going to run quarterback to pitch. The way that the Miami 4-3 works is we are going to bring that end down. He is going to bend. He is going to hammer the dive, and then we're going to get a natural gap exchange with our linebacker, who now becomes the quarterback player. This happens on the weak side of the 4-2-5. It can happen on the strong side of the 4-2-5, but in general on the 4-2-5, the strong end is different than the weak end. Okay, so he becomes the quarterback player because he's playing in a 6-eye or a 7 or a 6 or a 7. They're all inside shade or head up on the tight end. The nose and the tackle is in a 3-tech on the guard. He is in a slight shade, which I think helps more with vision and maybe with a little bit of just understanding. The nose is in a slight tilt. They're all in a slight tilt. Maybe it helps with vision of the ball. Credit card alignment, as tight to the ball as you can get. Your hand should be in front of your nose. If your hand is in front of your nose and behind the ball, a credit card's width behind the ball, then you're onside. And that's what we try to get as much of the line of scrimmage as possible. Slight tilt by the tackles. Defensive ends are heavily tilted. We are all spilling, and the main rule is block down, step down. If your guy blocks down, you squeeze down that hole, whether you want to bend. I like to bend. Some guys will just squeeze, side shuffle. That works too. So one of the advantages that we come to with that, and just talking about the 4-2-5, is that the advantage here, all of your defensive linemen, now by their personality or their size, their ability, their speed, whatever, their talent, not everybody can be the 3-tech. The 3-tech is the war daddy definition. Like, he needs to be a stud. When we talk about personnel, he needs to be a stud. So not everybody can be truly interchangeable, but your defensive linemen all do the same thing in the base. Now, there'll be times when they're going to be playing in an inside shade, maybe even a head-up slanting, but everybody is in an outside shade, and so if you've only got one defensive line coach, that's fine. You teach a guy to play weak side end, he knows how to play 3-tech. May not be physically gifted enough to do it, but he knows how to play it because it's the same as it would be in the 5-tech weak side. So the interchangeability is a huge factor. Everybody's doing the same job. There's everybody's option responsibilities are basically the same. It is in that respect, this is a very simple defense for your defensive line. Very simple defense. And really across the board, it's ultimately pretty simple until you get into the coverage package, depending on how complex you want to run it. And then, of course, we can get buck wild with zone blitzes and stuff in this defense. The other thing is that because these guys are all spilling, because they're all playing outside shades, and because the defensive ends are not really in a position to get double teamed very much, they're not in a position to get comboed very much, we find, and what Miami did, was we can take defenders and we can move them down. In other words, when somebody says, oh, you should run the 33 stack or the 3-4 because you get more speed on the field, that person doesn't understand the Miami 4-3 defense. Flat out. Now, that 3-tech, I need him. My ends are going to be outside linebackers or safeties that don't win those jobs. And so when practice starts in the spring or in the fall, that first week of camp, and you're looking at your defensive line, and you're like, yeesh. And you've got some, chubby, slow kid standing out there at weak side end. I don't care. Because as soon as we're done sorting out who's going to win the strong safety and free safety job, or who's going to win the Sam and the Will job at linebacker, as soon as we sort that out, that defensive end's getting fired because the guy who lost that job is still going to be on the field. So we talk personnel later. The defensive ends are critical to the ability to make safeties into outside backers, to make outside backers into defensive ends, to even make defensive ends into the one technique for sure. The 3-tech needs to be an animal, okay? And then take all those other guys and make them offensive linemen, and they could be in your defensive line rotation. So the three things about this defensive line is it's a better position to spill, and that's who they are, and what they do is spill the football. Okay, if you don't know spill, force, all of that, I've got a video on the 425 you want to check out, but it teaches the umbrella principle to you. No cost to get that video. Just go to 425defense.com/podcast and watch that umbrella principle video. Then we go to the linebackers. Okay, the linebackers are where it seemingly starts to get complex, but it's really not. The linebackers, and for those of you watching the video, it's PowerPoint. The linebackers are technically two-gap defenders, and this is where things start to be different. because a lot of coaches will play the linebackers as the Mike backer has the open A gap, as the Sam backer has the open C gap on the strong side, and the Will backer has the open B gap on the weak side. My argument is you're not really, I mean, it's a 4-3, but it is not a two-gapped front, and therefore you can run into problems. Where do you run into problems? Nothing until you get to double tight. When you get to two tight ends, you can now run into an issue because you do not have a middle of the field free safety to run the alley. By having your guys be two gap defenders, you essentially have in the umbrella principle, you have 7 under the umbrella, but 1, because of the two gap principles, will end up effectively being your alley defender. If you set them up as single gap defenders, when they come into a two tight end formation, you have no alley defender on the weak side. When it gets even worse is when now there is a tight end and a wing on the weak side, and you have nobody to defend that D gap area between tight end and wing. That is why we need to be two gapped with the linebackers. And that is why the 4-3 that I see so much of, where the Will stands over the B gap and the Mike stands over the A gap and the Sam stands over the C gap, is not, in my opinion, a good, sound defense. By my definition, I should say. It's not my opinion, it's my definition. By my definition, it's not an opinion. It's not sound. By your definition, it may be, and that's okay. And I'm sure lots of people have won a lot of games with it. I've also played teams that ran it and done pretty well against them. So, where are our linebackers lined up? The Mike linebacker is stacked directly behind the nose in a weak 10. The Mike linebacker is defending. We key backfield. This is the only defense where I recommend a backfield key because of the way that everything's set up, although we can do other things. I can read the center, but it gets more complex. So a backfield key backfield flow. If I read flow strong, the Mike backer, again, in a weak side 10, but has even perfect reach to either strong side A or weak side B. If he gets strong flow, inside flow. Okay, strong flow, not flood, not outside flow. If he gets downhill inside the tackle flow, he is A gap. He is spill A gap, strong. If he gets weak side flow, inside B gap, he is B gap spill. Okay. He is probably the most important, maybe the 3-tech, but you can argue he's one of the... There's more super important guys in this defense, and that's why I say it gets more complex. It gets harder. But the Mike backer is A gap spill strong, B gap spill on weak. He is never cut back on an inside run. He will have the cutback on an outside run. He is never cut, and he has run through. He is never cut back on an inside run. The other two guys, and the thing about it is if you teach him flow, you don't have to be like, again, we go back to, I know he's A gap strong, B gap weak, but he's just reading backfield flow and then filling the first open door. Like, if he's reading backfield flow and he sees backfield flow strong, he's not going to go fill weak side B gap. Like, what an idiot. Neither is the Will linebacker on backfield flow strong in a 4-2-5 or a 4-4. Why would he fill weak side B gap on strong side flow? He's going to counter shuffle it. Against a really good zone team, I might have him go ahead and fill, and I've done that before, but that's different. Okay, so the Mike backer is just filling open doors based on the direction of the flow. Okay. So it's not that complicated. But it, again, is an added element that you don't have in other defenses. Now, the Sam and the Will are simpler. The Sam is very simple, as long as we've got our tight end in the game, and it's not a trips formation. So he's a 50 tech, outside shade of the tackle. We had the 0 on it, means 5 yards off. He is responsible for the C gap. Okay, responsible for the C gap. Of course, this gets into a lot more than we can do in this podcast, but now when there's no tight end and the Sam backer has to walk out and we have to make a check for tray formations, again, it's more complicated, but that Sam backer walks out, he is essentially the alley defender out there now, unless you want to make him force. And some of our checks will make him the force defender. But he is going to be the alley defender out there, basically, when he walks out. He's going to help you cover a slot and those kinds of things. So he's got to be able to play both in space. And the more spread that we saw, the more I took this guy from always being like a bigger linebacker to being the guy that could walk out there, maybe play some cover one, maybe do some different things. The will backer on the other side is in a weak 50, what we say a loose 50. He is going to be his inside foot on the outside foot of the defensive end. So he's a little loose there. Remember that the Mike backer is spill B gap, so the will backer doesn't have to spill B gap. What we have him do is what we call a spin technique on inside flow, where he just kind of slow plays it, right? And he's ready. He will essentially become your alley defender to the weak side. And as long as the Mike backer spills like a B gap ISO, he'll bounce it to the will. But the will is going to be playing. If you brought in a tight end, we would make a heavy check, and we would go to a 2-eye and a 6-eye or 7 with the weekend inside shade of the tight end. And the will backer is now in position to play that alley to the weak side. Remember, I said if he's B gap responsible, you end up not having any alley fill on the weak side, and that is bad. That is not good because your run fits won't work. They won't. Kick that guy out and then run through the alley. Sorry. So the will backer is never going to be taking on a direct, pounding block. And so he can be smaller, quicker, able to cover the flats, able to maybe cover some one-on-one. He can do some different things for you. He plays almost like a hybrid outside linebacker safety would in a 4-2-5 and a 33, or an outside linebacker in a 3-4. You're kind of thinking a weak side outside linebacker in a 3-4. You're kind of thinking more like linebacker safety-ish. And so again, with the Sam and the Will, we're moving guys down, okay, where we've taken the safeties and moved them to outside linebacker. I can take some more traditional outside linebackers and move them to end or even the nose. And I like shooter noses. I like 180-pound wrestler kids at nose, okay? The Mike linebacker is a traditional Mike linebacker. The 3-tech is a traditional 3-tech defensive lineman. You need those two. And you need, if you want to be really good in this defense, you need those two. And that's why, again, I say in high school, I recommend that most of us who are in, regular situations, we don't know what we're going to get. 4-2-5, 33, maybe 3-4. If you're in the upper level where you're going to get, where you're a Division I factory, if you're in a Texas, Florida, Georgia, California, in the areas, obviously the entire states are not that way, but in one of the areas where you're just loaded with studs, like Mississippi is just flooded with defensive linemen. Okay, you're going to have a 3-tech in a lot of Mississippi, not all, but those kinds of things. Like you can be a 4-3 team, but if you don't know what's going to show up for the 21 guys that are going to be on your roster next year, this probably isn't the defense for you. That's just being honest. But that's how we play our linebackers. Generally backfield keys and keying flow, but you can key guards. I've also had the Mike key the linebacker, key the flow, and still use the Sam and the Will to key guards or key a 2-man surface, guard tackle surface. Done some different reads. You can make your decisions on what you think works best for you. But that's the linebackers in the Miami 4-3 defense and how they structured together. And again, with the Sam needing to be a little bit more flexible, with the Mike being a traditional linebacker, and with the Will being almost like a hybrid because he's not going to get ISO'd. Okay, I can blitz him in there and he'll run into an ISO, but he's not going to get ISO'd and that kind of heavy pounding. The ball's going to spill to him. He's going to have quarterback on option in our base option plays. And this defense is, I will say that if you've got an option heavy area, and it's hard to beat, it's hard to get a better option defense because that's what it was built for. But I think the funny thing about it, and I gush over it, the defense was developed to stop the wishbone option. Who runs the wishbone option today? Like, how many guys? There's one guy sitting in his car right now who's like, we run the wishbone option. Okay, let me tell you, in 95 or more % of high school schedules, there is not a wishbone option team on there. But what's amazing about the design of the Miami 4-3 defense is that even when the wishbone option became essentially obsolete, obsolete's not the word, but just nobody's running it, when it disappeared from the football landscape, all the principles stayed. Took it and ran it in with the Dallas Cowboys and won Super Bowls without changing the core structure of the defense. And you can go and watch those defenses, and it's the core structure that is the same. Obviously, those guys can do a lot more, but it's amazing. The safeties. You can use either safety or outside linebacker force. For our purposes, we're going to talk about the safeties being the force defenders in a quarters coverage. Now, you don't have to run a quarters coverage. I think, though, if you're going to be a base cover 3, again, I don't know that this was the way that I would go. It's a very good defense. But if you're going to be a base cover 3, now your will backer becomes force, and your weak safety or free safety becomes the alley defender. And essentially, on the weak side, you get into a 4-2 type of situation. It's a different look, and it's not wrong. But when I teach the 4-3, again, it's a little bit more complicated. And so probably if you're at the level where this is the right defense for you, you're facing enough passing attacks where quarters is really something you're going to want to be able to do. And so I'll mention that quarters coverage, and I've got an interview that I did with Shap Boyd way back in the early days of the Football Coaching Podcast. I learned a lot of the quarters coverage. Shap Boyd had a video called Quarters Coverage Made Simple. Don't know why all of my videos are so close at hand. This is the case for Quarters Coverage Made Simple if you're watching on YouTube. This is the case for it. And the best part is I got this case and I opened it up, and you know what is not in the case? Somebody else had the case. I can tell you what's not in it. It's got Darren Slack's Volume 5 of the C4. Very good stuff. It's not Quarters Coverage Made Simple. However, I think we're going to be evolving well beyond that, and we've already evolved well beyond that with the quarters coverage. So that's one of the updates I want to do with the 4-3 system. Is I think we're going to play the read check as the primary, like this is what we run, and alert is not going to be an automatic. Alert is more like a soft cover 2, but with backer force. It's essentially removing players from the box, and it dates back to a time when 4 wide receivers on the field meant passing, and we all know that today 4 wide receivers on the field doesn't mean passing at all. I mean, it's as much a run formation as anything. So we have to keep our at least 6-man box. 6-man spill in the box. And that can be done either with cover 2, so going back to the Miami Hurricanes 2-deep coverage and going back to cover 2 with corner force, I like that. Or playing your normal robber, double robber read check, okay, that we've done before. I still love the survivor check for 3x1 though. Still love that. For those of you who are familiar with what we've done in the 4-3 system. Okay, so we're going to be talking safety force. The big thing here, 9 yards off, really what happens is your corners are really deep half defenders, because unless you get a vertical by a number 2 receiver, then those safeties are not going to be deep, right? They're going to be robbing. If they don't get a vertical by a number 2, then they're going to be robbing. This is very much the way that the free safety plays in the 2 check in our 2 coverage in the TCU system. Okay, for those who are familiar with the 4-2-5, play very much the same way, but we're playing it on both sides and more like a double robber type of situation. But he also has the force. Okay, he's also not the force. Like, he doesn't have kyber crystals. He doesn't have a lightsaber. He's never met Luke Skywalker. He's force responsible in the defense. If you have a safety who is trained with Luke Skywalker, none of this matters to you because you're undefeated. And play him in the middle of the field. Don't put him on one side. Guy's a Jedi. Like, why would you put him on one side of the field? There's people turning off the podcast. Coaches all over the country turning off the podcast. This nerd. Oh well. Okay. So, they are going to be your force defenders. They are going to be responsible for the vertical of number 2 in your base robber coverage. But if 2 goes out or in, they are going to become a robber where they can jump down underneath a curl route or intersect the post route and all those sorts of things. And it gets complicated here. But my preference is in your highest level. And one of the good things about this, and every defense this is true of, one of the good things about this is that if you decide to run this as your varsity defense in a high school, and I should say that if you've been running it for a long time successfully, I'm by no means saying that you need to change it. When I talk about it is complicated and I would run this or I would run that, once you've established something and you know how to teach it, you can teach it. But it's do what you do, especially if it's working. But I'm talking more of, because I get a lot of questions about what defense should I run. So I'm just trying to answer that question preemptively. Just like I answer the question of what program are you using to draw that up. Like almost every video has that question in somewhere at some point. It's PowerPoint. So that's probably the base coverage. And as we go to talk about this in a minute, these guys are going to be extremely important. And any defense, and any time that you listen to me talk about defense, the force players, the guys outside of the umbrella, they are going to be, by and large, the most important defenders on your defense. They don't have to be the best, but they can't be schmucks. Like, they have to be pretty good. And when you play these guys 9 yards off the ball and ask them to force, these guys need to be really good. So they're extremely important. But you can run, as I started to talk about, you may not have those guys or be able to teach pattern match quarters at your JV or your freshman or your feeder schools, your middle school. You might not need to do all that. You might not want to do all that. It's very easy to run a cover 3, cover 1. You want to run 2 read concepts and more complex stuff too? You can absolutely do that. You want to have all the checks. You want to have everything. You want to run palms. You want to run 2 read. You can do all of that. Okay? But what has worked well in the past for me is that even though the varsity is doing all the pattern matching and stuff, I got dogs barking. I'm trying to check the cameras. Who's out there? What's worked really well is that, okay, the varsity is going to run the full set of checks. We're going to do different checks. We're going to run 2 read. It's not complicated. They mostly involve one guy doing one thing different. The JVs, okay, they're a little more advanced. They're going to run just the read check. And we're going to deal with the fact that they don't always get in the perfect check on everything. But they're just going to run read, which is the base robber that we talk about here. The freshmen, they're going to run cover 3 because it's easier for them to run. They're just going to run a base cover 3, and because I can probably find one freshman who can run the alley really well, right? And he can be the free. And we're getting the base concepts, but we're getting the concepts of force and spill, and those are what matters. We're getting to work on tackling. We're getting to work on block destructing, but we're not spending a bunch of time teaching pattern match coverage. We're going to run the spot drop cover 3, and I will usually have a spot drop cover 3 as a change up coverage to the quarters and rotate to it. And probably cover 1 man, too. Knowing that we won't be that good in cover 1. Like, you can't... I'm not going to run a lot of cover 1. I'll probably run more cover 0. It's really, really hard to teach pattern matching and then turn around and teach good technique in press man, for example. You're going to run out of hours in the day. But that's our safeties, and that's what they do. This will be... I guess segment 4, but I didn't mark all the other segments. It was segment 2. It'll all be just one video on YouTube. So I want to talk about the personnel and what you need, and I've talked about it a lot as we've gone through, but I think that let's just summarize who do you need to run this defense. Okay, let's start with the defensive line. I'm going to need a defensive tackle at the 3 tech who is a stud, a war daddy, a beast, an animal, whatever you want to call him. Okay. I'm going to need an anchor, a plug. And we talk about defensive line play and we say 1 man cannot block me, 2 men cannot move me. And we try to get our defensive linemen to truly believe that 1 man cannot block me, 2 men cannot move me. Well, with this 3 tech, he cannot be single blocked. If he can be single blocked, you are losing that game. If he can be single blocked by most of the teams that you play, you're going 0-10. He cannot be single blocked. Sometimes he gets single. I mean, just nobody's perfect, but he cannot be single blocked. He can beat a double team sometimes. He doesn't get blown out on a double. If he's getting pushed into the lap of your Mike linebacker, one of the people that I learned was some 4-3 defense when he was at Clemson was Vic Koenig at a Glazier clinic. He had my favorite quote of all time from a clinic. I'll never forget it. This was philosophy on blitzing, which if you can get there, if you can't get there with 4, bring 5. If you can't get there with 5, bring 6. If you can't get there with 6, drop 8. And if you still can't stop them, call in the dogs and piss on the fire because the hunt is about over. I mean, that's beautiful. That's like poetry. Well, if your 3 tech is getting pushed into the lap of your Mike linebacker, call in the dogs. We also talk hunting on the Football Coaching Podcast. If it's your first time listening, I'm just kidding. That's like probably the only hunting reference ever made. Unless I told that story before, which I'm sure I have, because I love it. Anyway, 3 tech needs to be a stud. Traditional defensive lineman. I already said those defensive ends. In a 4-2-5, I need that strong end to be, stud. Not a 4-3. Need to be able to run. Hybrid. Outside linebacker, safety, defensive end type of guy. I say hybrid, but he's gonna be down on the line, unless you use a 33 stack package with him, which I like, or a 3-4 package with him. He's not gonna be standing. I mean, he's not gonna be, out in space that much. He's not playing man coverage, but he's gonna be out here and he's just running. He's not getting, he's got a great job. Really does. Weekend is the same. The nose, if I've got two defensive linemen, I'm going to use them. Two studs. The other one's going to be at the nose. If I don't, in a 4-2-5, I would use the second one at the strong end. If I don't, I love shooters. I love to get another speed on the field guy here. Another 165-pound wrestler or 135-pound wrestler. It's just quick as snot. Right? Great. Let's do it. Mike linebacker. So, again, speed on the field. At 9 out of 11 positions, I can put the 9 fastest guys that I have. One is a stud defensive lineman, and one is a traditional tackle-to-tackle linebacker, and that is your Mike backer. Sometimes I do have a guy who the best tackle-to-tackle linebacker can also run sideline to sideline. It's glorious. It's rare. I need that guy who can play A-gap strong and B-gap weak. When you play an actual option team, you play a flex bone option, you play a split back veer, he is going to be, and this is the problem, I've used small, tough guys, but when you play an I formation ISO team, when you play a dive option team, he is going to be in 30 violent collisions with the fullback. He is married to the fullback, and he is going to be in violent collisions with that guy over and over and over again. And so if he's undersized, he may be good to go the first game, but if you get 2 or 3 in a row, and I've had it happen, it's going to be very hard for him to hold up. Very hard. I had a kid who I thought was the perfect Mike linebacker. And he was. In every aspect, but he was 5'9", 180. And we had dive option and I formation teams on the schedule that he was in violent collisions. I counted 27 one night. And, by week 3, his body's breaking down. Little injuries become big injuries and things like that. So you've just got to be aware of that situation. The Sam and the Will, hybrid safety linebacker guys. If you play a lot of inside run teams, then the Sam may take a little bit more collision than the Will. The Will doesn't really have any sort of interior gap. Even with the 2 tight end, he's got the D gap. He's got the edge. He's got the alley. The Sam is going to gap exchange on the option, so he's going to end up with the quarterback. So you want somebody who can run there. So these guys don't need to be, they need to be able to run, and they don't have to be huge. Traditional linebackers, they're more like hybrids. Okay. Now, a lot of guys hybrids, when we talk about hybrid safeties, he probably needs to be bigger than a 4.25 overhang, because a lot of us run 4.25 overhangs that are like, especially the Sam, that are like 140. I've done a lot of it. Got to be bigger than that, preferably. But in high school, height and weight like 170, 180, he's okay out there. Right? Do I prefer 5'11", 195 across the board? Yeah. Who run really fast? Yeah. That's maybe the Mike is 6'2", 220. Yeah, I want that, but yeah, we don't usually get that. But the outside backers can run. The safeties are studs. So this is why I say this is not for the guy who doesn't know what you're going to get, because I need a stud 3-tech, a stud Mike, and I need a free safety and a strong safety. You will only go as far as these guys take you. And because of their jobs, they have a much harder job to force or play a vertical, a much harder job than the strong safety or weak safety in a 4.25, in a 33 stack. A much harder job. When these guys are good, you're good. When these guys are not good, they're not. You're not. When you've got a 3-tech, a Mike, and 2 safeties, this defense, dude, you're rolling. As long as you don't confuse anybody. Because everybody's better being not confused. Coach Simple, play fast, win still applies. When you do not have 2, and that's why I say, look, in the 4-2-5 or in the 33, when you want to be a 1 high or you want to go split field coverage, the reality is you need, especially if you want to be cover 3, cover 1, you need 1 safety. Now, you will still only be as good as the alley fill from that safety, but you need 1 in the 4-3, more so than anything else. You need 2. In a 4-3 quarters coverage, you need 2. Now, if you run cover 2, different. I've never run cover 2 as a base coverage, so I can't tell you exactly where things break down. I would assume it's if your corners are terrible. But you need 2. If it's working, it's working. If it's not, it's not. So details on those, the 2 best football players you got that can run. They got to be able to run. They got to be able to cover a vertical by number 2. You're going to give them some distance. You're going to give them 9-10 yards off, so they're okay there. But they need to be able to run. Your corners, you can really use some average athletes out here. Guys that don't love to tackle. I mean, look, you don't want guys that don't love to tackle, but this is where you put them. Undersized, it's okay. I mean, you're always going to have the issue of if he's 5'6", you're going to get that 6'5" Division I guy is going to go for jump balls on him. Okay, but that's just your personnel. You ran out of bullets, so that's just a deal. But the corners would be probably, I mean, honestly, the weakest players on the defense. Not in terms of like their bench press, but I'm saying they're not defensive standouts. They don't tackle particularly well. Obviously, I prefer one that can tackle. But they don't have to be great in coverage. They don't have to have any outstanding skills. They can be very average players, and you can still have a very good high school defense out there. So that's what we're looking at with the personnel, and I can't stress enough that you need to know that you're going to have a 3-tech, a Mike, and you're going to need to have 2 safeties. If you've got the depth of talent in your organization to do that, or if you're in a position where you can recruit, whether you're a private high school or you are, a college, whatever, then great, good to go. If you already know this defense inside and out, like the back of your hand, and it works, and you don't have any issues with that kind of stuff that I've talked about, keep running it. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm saying if you want to be your absolute best, you need that.
And be sure to check out some of my other videos, including other videos from this podcast. And I've got a lot of other great coaching videos on this channel that you can check out that are shown down below here. Also, if you want to subscribe, make sure you don't miss any future videos. Just click on the logo on the top left of the screen.